Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to Rampage Reviews. I'm Rampage, and we are back to Disney Star Wars New Era, The High Republic, on the 6th book. Let's dive in. So as I said, this is the 6th book of the High Republic era, called Tempest Runner, and it takes place immediately following the events of The Rising Storm. It is written by Canon Scott, same writer of Light of the Jedi. Okay, quick post-shoot edit here. Canon Scott did not write Light of the Jedi. That was Charles Soule. Canon Scott wrote The Rising Storm. You may continue. And I am completely aware that my videos have been extremely long, especially the last couple or three videos that I've had. So we're going to try to shorten this up a little bit. I'm going to try to summarize a bit better this time. This book is basically about how Lourna Dee comes into the Nihil. She is a Tempest Runner with the Nihil in 232 and 231 BBY. Now we're going to learn about how she joined the Nihil, and also about what happens after the events of The Rising Storm, because right now the Republic thinks that she is the Eye of the Nihil, and Marchion Ro has taken off after he released the Leveler on Galzar, I think was the planet at that time. This book kind of bounces back and forth between the story of Lourna Dee joining the Nihil, as well as her being captured by the Republic and imprisoned on a ship called the Restitution, which is a correctional vessel for the Republic. It's being told from the point of view of a bar patron at the time, and this bar patron is talking to another bar patron about being on Lourna Dee's Tempest. He was a cloud for Lourna Dee, and little does he know that the person he's talking to, which is a much larger fellow, is actually Pan Eyta, who is another Tempest Runner for the Nihil. And Pan Eyta is actually trying to find Lourna Dee because Lourna Dee left him in a really bad spot the last time that they knew each other. He intends to kill her, and he wants her to die at his hands, not in any other way. So Lourna Dee is captured by the Republic. She is imprisoned. You learn that Lourna Dee grew up in a very troubled childhood. She was tricked by a lover of hers that tricked her and her family into giving him power over her home planet, because her father was the ruler of said planet, which is Aloth. Aloth is a neighbor to Ryloth, which is the home of the Twi'leks, the home planet of the Twi'leks, which Lourna Dee happens to be a Twi'lek. And after this happens, after this person takes control of the planet, Lourna Dee is forced to abandon her home planet and start a new life for herself. Later on, some years later, she comes upon Aloth again and is contacted by this new ruler, which was her former lover, named Bala. Bala needs to enlist her to help protect the planet against the Nihil. He doesn't know who she is at the moment, although he recognizes her voice for a second, but takes her on as a mercenary and asks her to protect the planet so that way they can get their exports off-world. She agrees and then runs into the Nihil, and it just happens to be Pan Eyta's Tempest that she runs into, decimates his whole crew, which impresses him, and he decides to take her under his wing. They take her back to the leader of the Nihil, Asgar Ro at the time. She ends up giving up Aloth to the Nihil because of her bad history with Bala. So now after we leave the flashback of how she joins the Nihil, they get back to her imprisonment. Pan Eyta ends up finding her, or tracking her down on the Restitution, actually tries to attack the ship and destroy it in some way. Lourna is able to trick him with a few of her crewmates she made during her time there, and ends up killing Pan Eyta, takes control of the Restitution, renames it the Lourna Dee, and then takes her spot back as a Tempest Runner for the Nihil, with now Marchion Ro as the Eye of the Nihil, since Asgar Ro was killed previously. So what did I think about the book? I wasn't really hurting to learn Lourna Dee's story. She's not a character I latched onto. I think I've seen some other people feel the same way. I really like the story of the High Republic so far, the different eras that I've read. 382 BBY was great. At least the last book was great in that era. 232 and 231 BBY have been pretty good so far. I enjoyed the last two books. I don't know how I feel about script books at this point either, because this is another script book and it's for an audio play. And while the story is interesting, obviously the dialogue is still a little bit cheesy. This book, the dialogue is actually much better than the last script book that I read, which was The Battle of Jedha. While it dives into this backstory, the idea of her on a prison ship of the Republic's is kind of a short story, and it's elongated by the fact that she makes friends with different crewmates and talks about her past, and you kind of learn a lot about who she is and why she is the way she is. Given the nature of the story, I did enjoy the book, but it wasn't something I was totally excited to read or really felt like I needed to know. Although it does feel like that Lourna Dee is a big part of the story in this era. So if she comes into live action, or if there's more stories that feature her, I'm sure that they'll become more and more interesting as you see her arc. And she actually kind of had a small arc in this book. But you see her arc, Pan-Eta's arc, different stories regarding Marchi and Ro. If they start to investigate more of that relationship, I'm sure it will get more interesting at that point. So can it mesh with Legends and things that I found interesting in the book? I am one with the Force. The Force is with me. Remember hearing that from Chirrut Imwe in the Rogue One, and we now hear it again in this book from a Jedi named Skier, which you may know by the name that he's a Trandoshan, and you may know that he's a Jedi because of the phrase that he's saying right now. This is just during a scene in the book where Skier is trying to hold a door barricaded to save a couple of other Jedi that are with them, so there's kind of a tense moment where the Jedi, and this is when the Jedi are trying to take Lourna Dee captive to bring her onto the restitution and have her imprisoned. Before they were exotic dancers for Jabba the Hutt, the Twi'leks of Ryloth were actually spice runners, and that was their main economic good during this time. It's actually said in Legends that Ryloth is still the home planet of the Twi'leks in regards to Legends, but their main economic good in that time was slavery. It doesn't really conflict with canon history. They still talk about the Twi'leks dealing in slavery, but this book just happens to emphasize their spice trade. Based on those truths, this is still something that can mesh with Legends if they happen to talk about Twi'leks in canon and bring back stories of Twi'leks in previous stories. The famous Jedi killer has a song in this book. Of course, I'm talking about the Leveler from 382 BBY, who was then released by Marchi and Ro after he found him in ice in 231 BBY in the Rising Storm. And the song goes like this. I'm not going to sing it, but I will say it. Shri Kai Karai, we're coming to take you away. They'll do what they can and they'll do what they must. When they find you, all there'll be is dust. Reminds me of when the Leveler attacks Jedi and then they turn them into these husks of dust. That's kind of why I felt like it was the Leveler. Sounds like it is. So they have their own song. Awesome. And my last point that I found interesting, there's only 4 in this book because I didn't find a ton of like standout stuff that was interesting in this story. I'm not saying the story wasn't interesting, but I'm looking for stuff that makes me think of other things in prequels or OT that stick out to me and enhance the story in some way. Since it's such a specific story about Lourna Dee, I didn't really see much in the story that was standout. However, the last point that I found interesting was "Speak of the Sith," a phrase that was uttered in this book, and I thought it was kind of a cool phrase and just a small little interaction between a couple of people. Everyone out of their cells. Counselor Whittick wants you in the common area now. Speak of the Sith. Did you hear that, Quinn? Counselor Whittick wants us in the common area. So, I don't know. I just thought it was funny. And that's all I got. Short and sweet. So like I said, decent book. Not great. Not amazing. But not bad either. Better than the Battle of Jeddah. I believe I gave the Battle of Jeddah a 6-7. I'm going to give this one a 6-9. It's not quite in the 7s. It's not good enough for me to say I couldn't put it down. The nice thing about these script books is that they read so... Oops. I don't know if you see this, but they're so spaced out that they read really fast. So I could read like 200 pages in an hour. It's pretty cool. That is nice that you can get through the book pretty quickly. But for anyone that stopped by the video today, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you'd like to purchase this book, there will be a link in the description to do so. Just be advised that this is an Amazon affiliate link. And if you use this link to purchase the book, it will help support the channel in some way. But don't do it just to support me. Really appreciate it if you do. But let's do it so we can talk more about these stories and kind of dive in and see how the whole timeline can fit together, because that's what I really ultimately want to happen at some point. Will it happen? Definitely. Maybe not. But it'd be pretty cool if it did. You agree? So that's all I got for the day. Obviously, if you like the content that you viewed today, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. May the Force be with you, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks so much.